How about dental school? Pharmacy school? PA school? Okay, Samuel. Okay, cool. So, yeah, it looks like you guys, a lot of y'all have very different end goals. So, but nonetheless, even with very different end goals, these professional development skills are applied across the board, right? You need to know how to present yourself, not only written, right, and how to present yourself on a piece of paper, but also how to present yourself in person, right? Because as much as I would say, guys, I'm an organic chemist. I love organic chemistry. And I wish I could tell you that for the rest of your life, people are going to judge you based off how much organic chemistry you know. I wish I could say that. But it's not the case, right? People judge you based off of two things: the way you speak and the way you write. And this is, things that they're looking for when they're looking for an employee, when they're looking for a scientist, a physician, right? They're looking for communication skills. And so this is a reason I feel very fortunate because, I get to teach communication skills when it comes to writing. In the fall, I'll be taking over communication skills when it comes to presenting. So I feel like I really get to interact with students and really train them to be professionals. So with that said, today's lecture is about how to write a resume or a CV, and then what's the difference between a resume and a CV? All right, so let's do a show of hands here. How many of you now have at least a rough draft of a resume? Yeah, good. Quite a few of you. All right, good. Now, how many of you have been taught how to write a resume? Less of you, okay. How many of you have ever actually submitted a resume for either a job or some other type of application? Okay, so a lot of you have submitted some. Oh, a lot of you have submitted some, but you've never actually been taught. All right. So here's the thing. We're going to go through the proper way to write a resume, and then we're also going to discuss how to write a CV. Now, I will say this for those of you that are going to graduate school, you're more likely going to be having a CV for the rest of your life compared to a resume. Um, and what a CV ultimately is, it's a curriculum vitae, and it's basically a much lengthy version of a resume where we summarize our lifetime professional accomplishments, which means publications, presentations, courses we teach, things like this. So let's go ahead and get started with the presentation. This is a presentation that I found um, very useful, and I share this often. It's a PDF here, and it is from John Hopkins. It was a presentation on resume writing for those students who want to go to medical school. But as I was going through it, I realized that this is actually pretty applicable across the board, right? There's going to be some small tweaking here and there depending on, what you're applying to, but this actually is a pretty good indication across the board of what you should be doing. Now, so let's first start with the distinction between res and CV. So I already mentioned that a CV is a much lengthier version of a resume, our lifetime accomplishments. But a resume is written to be very short, very concise, but detailed enough for you to be able to, for the person who is going to be selecting the candidate to take the job to get an idea of who you are, right? And limited, and usually the resume, should not go more than one page. Now, here's the thing. Um, People think, oh man, I just need to get an interview. I just need to get an interview. You gotta realize that that resume or that CV is your first interview, right? That's going to be the very first thing that people are going to look at to determine whether you get that job, right? Or you even get maybe even a webcam interview for a certain type of position. So you want to make sure that that resume is very polished. Now, so let's talk about a resume for a job here. When we're talking about a resume job, you a common mistake that people do is that they submit the same resume to multiple different jobs without changing it. How many of you have done that? How many of you have used the same resume for multiple different things and you've never changed it? Okay, a few of you. Yeah. So this is a very common mistake. You should always make sure that you're fitting your resume to what it is that you're applying to. So sure, you should have a template resume where you can, move things and delete things and add things as you need to, but you should always um, format your resume to what it is that you're applying to. So for those of you that are looking to get jobs right after your bachelor's degree, your resume should tie very closely to that job description. Very close to that job description. Because now with technology, it's very rare, and I don't know how many of you have heard this, but it's very rare these days that the first person that will actually review your resume is actually a person. You're like, what do you mean? It's actually a computer. They'll send your resume through a computer program which will scan for keywords. And if it finds the keywords that it's looking for, it will give you a high score and then send you to a real person for that person to review their resume. How many of you have heard that? Yeah, a few of you, not too many. But so yeah, so I mean, this is very common these days where there's software to scan those words, and what you'll find is people are adding new sections to the resume called keywords, right? They'll literally have a section on the resume say keywords where they have so that way they can get past a computer program and those keywords are listed there. Feel free, guys, that let's make this really informal. If you have a question, you don't have to, you can just ask the question. Raise your hand and ask a question. You don't have to wait to the end or anything. Um, so yeah, so that's very common now, the software that scans for those keywords. And you say, well, how do I know what keywords should I be putting in my resume according to the job description, right? Um, you should have, Ryland says, is having a keyword section frowned upon? Actually, I initially thought so. And then after talking to some job recruiters for our undergrads, like Valero, San Antonio River Authority, they say that it's pretty common and they don't frown upon it as much. So yeah, it's not as bad as you might think, actually. Um, so um, so you need to tie this very closely to that job description, right? And you want to look at that job description, and so you tie in those keywords, right? So for example, if the job description says that they want somebody who has a lot of safety training, right, in a laboratory, because that's what you want to do. They should be part of their role is going to be able to conduct experiments safely and everything. Well, then I would start listing, right, all of the safety training that you guys have gone through, right, so those words get picked up. If they're looking for somebody who is familiar with Excel and MS Word, right, I would have that in my skills if that's what. So you want to kind of fit that. They're looking for somebody who's a good team player, right? Who says coordinated a team on when I used to work at this place. Pulling in those keywords and making sure that they hit is really important. Okay, because you want to make sure um, that you get past that first round. All right. So before I move on to the PowerPoint, that was just a general introduction about what we're going to be going over right now. Any questions before I move on to this? All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go with this, realizing that some of this might apply to you, some of this might not apply to you. So, and I'll do my best to say this is going to be a really important section for graduate students. This is going to be a really important section for medical students. This is going to be a really important section for those that are looking for employment. And that way we can, and then I'll show you an example of my CV. Okay. All right. So here we go. Let's go. How to begin? All right. So the biggest thing that you got to realize here when you're writing a resume or a CV is that you need to know who yourself, right? And you need to get very comfortable selling yourself, right? Being able to identify those things that you didn't realize are skills and put them out there, right? So you need to know about your education, have a good list of your accomplishments and awards and these type of things, your skills that you've acquired, volunteer experience, internships, other previous employment, extracurricular activities, these type of things. So you want to make sure you know you have a lot of this stuff in the background. And a lot of times you guys don't give yourself enough credit, right? You think like, well, Dr. Lott, I don't really have any skills. Like I don't really have much on my resume as far as like the skills section or any other section. I was like, really? Really? You went through 4 years of undergrad and you don't have any skills. 4 years of training to be a scientist and you don't have any skills. No, I don't have any. Oh, really? So you took almost a lab every single semester for 4 years and you don't have any skills? I mean, you took some labs with me, right? So you should at least know how you should know how to do a distillation, right? So what are your skills? Purification techniques, distillation, base extraction, chromatography, right? These things that you have been trained to do, that you learned how to do in the labs, these are skills that you need to take claim of, right? And be able to incorporate these in your resume, right? Now, don't get me wrong. You say, well, I don't feel like I'm proficient in them. Well, you're not saying you're proficient in them, but you can say that you've done it before. And if you had to go and review it, that you could do it again, right? If you had to go back and review it, then yeah, then those are skills there, right? Here's the other thing, a lot of cases in these um, in these labs, we make you go through safety training, right? You say, well, I don't have no skills to put in. Well, didn't we make y'all take a online course where you had to get a certificate for training, right? For safety training, you had to do waste disposal and general laboratory safety, and you got certificates for those. Shouldn't those can go on your resume, right? You took a course and you got your certification for those particular topics. Yeah, you can put that on your resume or your CV, right? Um, and if I were you, you can go log on to Blackboard and you see that we only required you to take two. There's others. There's blood pathogen, right? Safety, how to handle blood samples. There you go. Go take that quiz, get the certificate. Now you got your certificate in blood pathogen safety, right? There's even one for radiation, right? So these type of opportunities that you guys don't think about, you can include in your resume or CV. Now, like I also mentioned already, another key thing to keep in mind is that you need to know who is reading, right? That was very ugly, but you need to know who is reading because again, you should be programming it to what you're applying to. So if it's medical school, right, then you probably want to put a lot of your medical experience, whether it was chefing or maybe volunteering at nursing homes, these type of things. But the job that you had at McDonald's when you were 18 is probably less important, right? So this is what I mean by programming or gearing your resume to what it is that you're going for. Now, for the medical students here, right? For those of you that want to go to medical school, these are the things that they're looking for in a applicant, right? In fact, when I get a lot of students who ask me for letters of recommendation, which is a completely other lecture that we'll talk about because I feel like I need to teach students how to ask. Um, uh, I will not write a letter for a student unless I can comment on a lot of these things, right? If I can comment on their integrity and ethics, reliability, dependability, service orientation, social skills and interpersonal skills, teamwork, capacity for improvement, cultural competence, oral communication, written communication, academics, these type of things, this is what they're looking for, right? So you want to start thinking about different things that display these personal competencies that you can include in your resume. All right, so here is sections that we're going to go over. In your resume, you're going to have some contact information. You should always have your contact information. You're going to have your education, right? The degrees that you've earned or the degrees that are in progress and your expected date of graduation. You're also going to want your honors and awards, any honors and awards that you've received, experience, and this is where it starts to get a little bit more specific to your end goal. For those of you that want to go to graduate school, you'd be listing a lot of your research experience. For those of you that want to go to medical school, you might want to consider your clinical or shadowing experience, right? So you want to gear the experience towards the job that you're pursuing. Volunteer or community service, right? This is really important for those of you that want to go to pre-health professions. So any of the pre-health professions, whether it be PA, medical school, dental school, pharmacy school, they're very focused on volunteer. Survived online. I missed it. What did it say? Survived online classes using McDonald's Wi-Fi. Yeah, there you go. But they're very focused on these type of things. For graduate school, on the other hand, I'll be perfectly honest with you guys. You know, I've gone through the whole graduate school thing. They cared very little about my volunteer and community service. Sure, I had to check the box, but they cared very little about it. They were more concerned about my research output, right? So for those of you that go to do anything in graduate school, it's much more cutthroat, and that fact is they don't really care. I don't want to say care about the humanistic point, more so than the research. They want to know, can you do research and how much research experience do you have, right? And then leadership, right? Leadership and extracurricular activities. And then again, really important, skills. Do not forget skills. Skills is really important here. All right. So let's start off with the very first section, which is information, right? So here you'd list your full legal name, right? Your full legal name. You would not put nicknames, right? Like for example, you're not going to say, um, um, let's say, let's think of a random name, Beverly Cutie Pie Rodriguez, right? You would not do that, right? You do not put nicknames. You simply put your legal name. I've often seen this a lot of times people do this is they'll put their real first name and then in quotes what they get called and then their last name. That is not professional. They're going to want to do a criminal background check. So just put your full legal name, right? You also want to include your address here. And I would suggest that you put your current or permanent address, right? So I know a lot of you guys as students, y'all move around a lot. But if you have a permanent address, like, you know, where you consider your permanent place of residence, that's the one that you should include. You want to include your telephone number, which is your home or cell phone. I don't think most people use their cell phone these days. And you want to include your email address. Here's the thing, make sure your email address is professional, right? JuicyLips47@gmail.com is not something that you want to put on your resume, right? A lot of cases, I would even say your ABC123 is not a professional email address. You want to develop, if you don't have one, you should make an email address that has your name in it, right? Or some incorporations of your name in that email address. You can also include a website if that is something that is relevant, right? I had a friend who was a photographer and he was looking for some jobs and he had a website of different works that he has. Yeah, that's absolutely great. But the other thing that you want to if you don't have something like that, you can have a LinkedIn. How many of you have heard of a LinkedIn account? Amanda, unfortunately, I'm not very good at making websites, so no, I can't teach you how to do that. All right, so quite a few of you have heard about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is basically the professional Facebook, right? Do not put your Facebook on your resume. And here's the thing, here's another hint to you guys. The moment you start applying to different things, deactivate your social media or change your name on your social media because I promise you, because I've done it, they're gonna go look, right? When you're looking to hire somebody, they're gonna say like, "Huh, let's go see who this person really is on Facebook." And if they see them, you know, throwing shots on a Wednesday happy hour, dancing on a bar, you know, this is gonna be not favorable, right? So don't think that they won't look. I mean, social media is huge right now, right? So be cautious of that. LinkedIn is a professional platform. If you haven't heard of it, I would suggest you look it up. This is where professionals go and they list their skills and accomplishments so that when employers are looking for a certain type of person with type of skills, LinkedIn allows this a lot easier to do to search for people and encourage them to apply for jobs. So in a lot of cases, you can get employers come to you rather than you going to employers, right? All right, so this is what you list. Here's an example look like. You'd have your name and have your name stand out from the other information. In this case, they put it all in bold and capital letters, right? I'll show you what mine looks like that will take a little less space, but make it stand out, right? So you have the address, the phone number, email address, and so forth. All right, so then you have a profile. This is optional. It's not always used, but I think this profile is very good aspect to do when you're looking for a job because what you can do is start pulling in those keywords from the job description and put this under your profile. So if let's say that they're looking for in the job description somebody who has technical support or computer technical support experience and so forth, well then you would put this right technical computer language and interpersonal skills right under your profile so they can kind of rather than I think Rylan you said is it kind of frowned upon to put the keywords. Yeah, I can see why you asked that because you're just like that's kind of like cheating in a way. At least it makes you feel like you're cheating in a way. Well, then this might be a different way, right? Put profile here with a few characteristics that will do those kind of keywords. All right. Now, so then the next thing we're going to talk about here, I don't like this thing always switches. Um, section here is education and training. So this is where you're going to list your education. In other words, and you want to go from the current to the most recent first. So all of you are working on your degree right now. That should be the very first one. If you got any degrees before this, then you should include those, like an associate's degree or whatnot. You want to make sure that you include your major and your minor concentration. So if you're getting a bachelor's in chemistry with a minor in biology, then you want to include that to show that you have experience in these different fields. Now, at this stage, most of you are all seniors, right? Most of you are seniors. If not, you're definitely upperclassmen. So at this point, a lot of your high school is not going to go on your resume or CV, right? For example, I have a PhD. I'm not going to put that I have a high school diploma on my CV. It's assumed that I have a high school diploma, right? So the older or the more you progress in your educational career, what you'll notice is that the things from your previous degree kind of fall off, right? Um, so like high school diploma is not going to be as important anymore. Um, but your associates would, your bachelor's degree would. So you're going to include your graduation date here. And if you say, well, I haven't graduated yet, then you would put your expected date of graduation, right? You also want to include the college, the university name, obviously. So you guys would have the University of Texas at San Antonio. And even though people know the university, may know the university well, you still want to include the city and state and so forth of the university, just because it might be a place, it might get sent to some place with like, oh, I've never actually heard of UTSA. So they need to be able to have that. You'll also want to include your GPA, right? Now, actually, let me revise my statement. I would include your GPA if you consider it competitive, right? So in other words, and what's competitive? For a job, a 3.0 and above is competitive. For graduate school, a 3.5 and above is competitive. For medical school, 3.8 and above is competitive, right? So I would only include this information here if it is competitive. If it's not, then don't put it on, and then hopefully that way they can look at everything like all your other skills. And then when you get called in for the in-person interview, if it comes up, then you're gonna sell them with your charm and all the skills that you have. If it's not as competitive as you would like, right? And you can also include some study abroad experience here. Now, with that said, it's not often seen um, unless, the pre-health professions see this quite a bit. But you also want to make sure that if it's something that you spend a significant amount of time on, that you can include that. Sarah says, what about the difference between your overall versus your major GPA? So that's a very good point. If your major GPA is higher than your overall GPA, then I would definitely include that, especially if you're looking for a job. Let's say Sarah, let's say that you're a chemistry major and you want to go get a job as a introductory level chemist at Valero, and your chemistry GPA, and I'm just doing hypotheticals. You say your chemistry GPA or your major GPA is very high, but it's lower than your overall GPA. Then I would include it, right? Because they're going to be like, okay, maybe this person didn't do very well in art, but it looks like they knocked the chemistry out the park, and that's what I'm really looking for. Okay. Same versus overall. Same with overall versus UTSA. How much transfer? Amanda, can you clarify what you mean by that?
So I transferred to UTSA with a 4.0. But because I went from an A&M system to a UT system, I had to start all over, kind of, if that makes sense. I have an overall, but then I have a UTSA GPA.
Oh, right. So this is the great thing about the resume. I would go with the one that looks better, right? Because in that case, you're not lying, right? Now, when you're applying to like, I'm talking for a job. When you're applying to like medical school, pharmacy school, dental school, a graduate, then they're going to want both of those, and there's going to be spots in your application where they're going to ask for all of those numbers, right? But for a job, right, I would just include the one that makes you remember you're trying to sell yourself, right? So I would do the one that's higher there. Okay. Good question. It's very good questions. All right. So, and every time I do that, it has to go back. So if you look at it, it looks like this. So you'd have a section called education, and notice that those subtitles should stand out, right? They should stand out. Johns Hopkins University, Baltimore, Maryland, May 2013. That's when they graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Neuroscience, pre-med. Minor was anthropology, GPA 3.45, major GPA 3.68, right? So in this case, the major GPA kind of separates it out. John Carroll High School, Seattle, Wisconsin, June 2009, high school diploma, GPA 4.5, graduated top 5% of the class. So in this case right here, they included the high school. Why? Because it made them more appealing, right? It sold them. The fact that they were the top 5% of their high school class. For bachelors, for people that are just about to earn their bachelor's, I think that's fair enough to have your high school at that level. But if it's not that competitive or appealing, and you've already earned several degrees, right? Let's say you've earned an associate's and a bachelor's, then I think your high school would end up falling off. Okay. All right. So then the next section here are going to be your awards, fellowships, honors, and grants, right? Now, so you want to list them, all relevant academic awards. You want to make sure that you go in reverse chronological order. So you want to go from the most recent to the oldest one. You want to make sure that you include an explanation, right? So for example, if you received the Presidential Award, well, and you just list Presidential Award, it's going to leave the reader saying, what is that? Why did they get that award for? So if you get like the certificate, it usually is Presidential Award in recognition of blank. So put that in recognition of blank so that the reader knows exactly what it is that they're talking about here. You also want to show who gave it to you, right? Who gave you the award? Was there money involved? And if so, how much was it, right? These type of things. Again, showing that you are competitive and that you have some recognition there. All right. Um, so the next thing here is going to be experience. So this is gonna vary. Samuel has a question. Says for the award, does it have to be disappeared on me? Does it have to be specifically academic, or can it be from extracurricular as well? No, it can be from extracurricular, right? Maybe you got something as the team leader, right? Something like this at a job, right? Maybe you got that's an award, right? So anything like that. What about nominations? I would say if they are prestigious nominations, yes, I think that's okay to include those in your app in your resume. Okay. All right. Back to this. So experience, right? So this is where it's going to be really this is where a lot of y'all's resumes or CVs are going to be different from each other, because those of you that want to go to graduate school, you're going to be really focusing right here on this research experience, right? Those of you that are going to some type of pre-health profession, you're going to be thinking about this clinical or shadowing of experience. For those of you that are think about going into the jobs, then you're going to be thinking about this coursework, internships, right? These type of things, right? And also your previous work, your previous full-time and part-time employment, right? Because they're going to want an idea of your employment history. So so what do I so let's talk about that a little bit, right? We'll talk about how to list the research and the clinical so forth, but so why coursework? Well, think about it. If you're applying for a job, let's say again you're applying for a chemist position at Valero, and they say that in the job description that you will have to write biweekly reports, then what's a course that you think that you probably should list to say that you have experience in this area? What's a course that you took that might be appealing to them? Crickets. A course that you might be currently taking. It might look appealing to them to show that you communicate. Thank you, Riley. Right, thank you. Yeah. No wonder you guys are right. Chemical writing, right? The fact that you've had training in scientific writing, right? Might be a course that might be specific, right? Now, here's the thing though. If you're a chemistry, so let's say that you're getting a job at Valero, right? You're applying for a job at Valero, and you say, okay, I'm going to put coursework. I'm going to put organic chemistry, and you have listed that you got a good degree in chemistry. You put organic chemistry, general chemistry, biochemistry. No, I mean, you have a degree in chemistry. It's assumed that you take those courses, right? So you wouldn't list those. The courses that you want to list are the elective courses that set you apart from the other chemistry majors, right? So for chemical writing, right? Not all chemistry majors are taking that course or my course. NMR spectroscopy, that's another course, right? Green chemistry is another elective course. X-ray crystallography is another elective course. Those courses that set you apart, because it's assumed that if you have a chemistry degree that you have all these other chemistry courses. It's assumed if you have a biology degree that you took biology and biochemistry and all these others, which are the ones that set you apart from your colleagues that are earning the same degree. Okay. All right. So you also, again, for the experience, future employment, go ahead, Alejandro.
As far as experiences, like for example, in this course, with the work that we're doing in regards to our specific scientific proposals, I have a friend whose internship is basically her doing the same thing I'm doing by reading research papers, organizing them, writing some sections of their research. Could we list that? Because it's basically the same thing we're doing in this course.
Right.
Under our experiences?
Yeah, so what you can do with that, you can list that under coursework or projects, right? Because you guys are writing a research proposal, right? And I will say this, if anything, this is under the skills section, you've learned a lot of skills that you might not think are marketable. For example, being able to read scientific papers, that's a skill. Being able to search for them and familiar with how to use SciFinder, there you go. How to use EndNote for citations, software that you're familiar with, EndNote, there you go. ChemDraw, there you go, right? These type of things that you learned in your classes, especially in this class, you can add to this as professional experience. Does that answer your question, Alejandro?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I saw a question pop up, and I don't know who it was. Does somebody want to verbalize it?
So I did wildlife, and we created a wildlife plan, but we didn't actually do it because we're undergrads. Would that count as a skill?
I would probably consider that a project,
The
right?
project?
A planning of a project planning. Yeah.
Okay.
The skills that you would have learned while doing that would have been like teamwork, right? Teamwork skills, organizational skills, maybe you had to do some type of marketing, right? These type of things. All right, so then let's talk about describing experiences here. So we're going to demonstrate and quantify results, right? So we want to think about accomplishments, and these are action and results, right? So a lot of things are, for example, here's one thing. You guys realize that, y'all probably see me running around, or used to see me running around campus all the time. Now I'm just like at home on the couch, but I'm teaching on the couch, so that's okay. But you usually see me running around. There's a lot of committees that I partake in, and I partake in them thinking that they're going to be helpful, and then they don't help. They're not helpful. A lot of them end up doing the waste of my time. I only list committees that have actually produced results. If I went to a few meetings and nothing came of it, I don't typically list it. But if they produce some significant results, then I typically would list them, right? Because they're going to ask, "Oh, you were on this committee. What did y'all end up doing?" And if you say, "Well, we didn't actually accomplish anything," that right off the bat's going to look bad, right? But if you can say we accomplished this, this, and that, then that's a lot more helpful there. Okay. Okay. And then, so you want to make sure, this is a really good point right here. Spell out acronyms. So don't assume that people know different acronyms. Like if you say, "Oh, I'm an ACS member," they're gonna be like, "What's ACS?" Now, if you're applying for a chemistry job, I'm sure they do. But maybe you're applying for a biology job and they're not really familiar with the chemistry job. Then you're gonna say, you want to put it out. "I'm an American Chemical Society member. That's my professional membership." You also want to answer that question, "So what?" Right? If you're going to list something there, you want to be able to describe the experiences. You're just not going to put research assistant from 2010 to 2020. They're going to be like, "Okay, so what? What did you do as a research assistant?" Right? So you want to make sure it's a little bit more descriptive. All right, here we go. So here's, for those of you that are thinking about medical school, here's how you would lay this out for medical experience, like shadowing, right? You would include the location, right? You would include the location where you had that experience. You also want to include the city and state. You also want to include the time, or sorry, the month and year that you participated in. And which is really important here is you want to include your point of contact. Who was it that you were working with, right? Who's the person or the person that can verify that you had this experience? Which is even as important, though, is right here is, what did you do during that experience, right? What were the things that you were doing during that? In this case, accompanied doctor on rounds. Okay. What sounds a little bit better? Observed rounds and diagnosis discussions. Wow, that sounds a lot better than accompany the doctor on rounds, right? Observed a variety of cardiac and thoracic surgeries, attend lectures and ground rounds, shadow doctors in cardiac surgery unit, right? So again, even more descriptive to show and broadcast that experience that you're gaining, right? So for my pre-health professions, this is how you would lay this out. For my graduate here, right, we would be talking about your research experience, right? For your and here's the thing, for those of you that are pre-health profession, you might have some research experience too, which you can include on this, right? So research experience, you'd want basic information, for example, whose lab were you in and who's the PI? PI stands for primary investigator, or basically the professor of that lab. You want to give an overview of the project that you were working on, right? And the purpose and key findings. So again, we've talked a lot about how you can convey this information concisely, right? So you want to give a general overview of what that is. You want to explain what was your role in that research, because research is never done by one person, it's a group effort. So you want to explain what your role is in those efforts and what were your contributions, right? And these type of things. So if we look at how this is done, so here we go. So we say, okay, research programs support assistant. It was in the summer of 2012 at the University of Minnesota Brain Science Center in Minneapolis, right? And are the here are the things that were done, right? Program to conduct experimental concerning neural control of decision timing, analyze data using MATLAB statistical software, produce 20-page report of finding, attend weekly lab meetings, these type of things. Now, one thing that is missing here that you want to make sure you include is your PI information, right? Who is it that you worked for? You know, especially if your PI is a very well reputable, for example, Professor Doyle is a very well-known chemist around the world, right? So if you're in his lab, I would definitely have his name on your resume or CV. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about the leadership and volunteering portions here. So loyal to Doyle, yeah, that's right. Leadership and volunteering. So include volunteering and activities, especially as related to your field. So this is really important here. A lot of you guys do a lot of community service. And if you're on a resume, realize that you have very limited space. But even if you're on a CV, remember I said you want to gear it towards what you're applying to. So for example, let's say that you have volunteered, let's say you want to go to medical school and you volunteered at a, why am I drawing a blank? Drew a blank. Where they take care of the elderly? Somebody help me out. Nursing home. Sorry, nursing home. So let's say that you're volunteering at a nursing home for, you know, a lot of time here. Well, that would be very relevant to the medical field, right? You know, not only showing some, maybe getting some medical exposure, but also showing your empathy and your willingness to help others and these type of things. However, if you ended up decorating a float for UTSA days, probably not as significant, right? Probably not as going to be impactful compared to your end goal. So it really needs to be something that is related to your field. When you start thinking about your leadership and volunteering experience, pick things that are related to your field, because there's just going to be some things that are not going to look on as very high on the list, right? For each experience, you want to list your title, the organization name, and this information here, and the dates. It's also to include the knowledge and skills and accomplishments you gained from doing that volunteer experience. Another thing that students don't list, and I think it's really important that you list because it can sometimes set up a red flag, is how many hours you spent doing that volunteer work. Because if you put volunteer at a nursing home, did this stuff, and you list out the stuff and said, but when? Did you just go one weekend and that was it? Or did you go every weekend for a year, right? So how many hours did you put into this, into these individual types of projects? So here's an example. Student organizer, John Hopkins tutorial project, right? Mentored 6 college tutors who work with elementary, create individually tailored curricula in math and reading, supervised pair during each biweekly session to ensure a conducive, comfortable learning environment, collaborate with 10 organizers to guarantee safety and productivity, right? So here's the thing, you want to be very, for the lack of a better word, slick, right? Because if you think about that job description, let's say that job description said, experience in mentoring and tutoring younger students is required. They say that organizational skills and safety skills are required. Well, what did they do? They geared it directly to their skills right here. They would have said, okay, tutored elementary students, right? They said collaborate with 10 organizers, safety and productivity. So they're pulling in words from that job description that fit into their past experience, right? And that's how you want to make this smooth, a very smooth transition. All right. Now notice that they also mentioned some accomplishments here in the second one here. They say organize fundraisers for donations to Children's Miracle Network, increase revenue by 25%. That shows accomplishment, right? So you want to include those type of things also. All right, Christine, go ahead.
Okay, so I know we talked about having like a keyword section in the beginning, and I do see that they use like the keywords here as well, like more smoothly. And then I saw that you couldn't repeat words, so how does that work?
Good, so good. I say, in my opinion, the better strategy is to do it this way, where you incorporate those words naturally into your resume or CV, right? I say if you do that, then there's really no need for the keywords section. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay, cool. All right. So now, let's go to this next section over here, and this is from my science publications and presentations, right? As scientists, this is what we really are ranked as far as how good of a scientist we are, is how many publications do we have, how many presentations do we have, right? So the way you would, if any publications that you have, and I know that some of you have some publications, you would want to make sure that you use it in the citation that is according to your field. So you guys are already familiar with ACS citation. That's what I taught you in this class. So we would put ours in ACS citation. You also want to make sure that you put those publications in reverse chronological order, which means that the earliest first and the oldest last. And then if a lot of you will, maybe you haven't had any publications yet, but maybe you've gone to present. You know, the College of Science here at UTSA used to hold a conference where students would go and present their research. So you can those conference presentations also. And you want to say, okay, was this an oral presentation or was this a poster presentation? Right? And list those there. You also, if it turns out that your article is a very highly cited article, in other words, the people, when you guys write your research proposal, you're citing people's research. Well, that's how we judge how productive our research is how many times we get cited by other scientists, right? So if that's the case, then you want to also include that there, okay? Abdullah says, what if you're in the acknowledgement sections? I would probably put that probably at this point in your career, I think it's okay. But eventually, when you start producing your own publications, that would fall off. Yeah. All right. So if we look at it like this, right? So what we see here are the authors' names, and then the one in bold is where you are, right? That's the person. Where do you rank? Because remember, we said if you're first author, that means that you've contributed more than those that are later on, right? So where you rank is usually in bold. Then they have the title or they have the year, and then the title of the paper, the article, the journal name, and then the volume, and then the page number. So again, but you would use the citation method that's for your fields. In our case, it would be ACS citation. All right. Now, let's go on to the one that y'all think so weird. I don't have any skills. Sure you do. You have software, you have computer skills. Well, I know how to use a computer, sure, but I assume you know how to use Microsoft Word and Excel and PowerPoint. Yeah, but everybody does. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised that there's still some people that are older generation, and some of them might be your professors who still struggle with PowerPoint, right? So you might want to list those that you are familiar with that. But even more specifically, the software or type of things that you've learned that are specific to our field, like SciFinder, ChemDraw, Dr. Armand uses one in Gen Chem. Can somebody help me remember what that one that y'all taught? Anybody remember? I forget. But you know, these type of things, Lab Archives, is it that one? It might be that one. I don't remember. But point being is list the stuff that you're familiar with. Now here's the thing, language is a skill. How many of you here are bilingual? Now, okay, good. Now, how many of you are really bilingual? Really bilingual? I'm not saying anything. Why do I say that? Well, here's the thing, guys. If you're saying that you are bilingual, if you're saying that you are fluent in a certain language, that means that you better be able to hold a conversation in that language, right? Don't be saying, "Oh, I kind of know." No. And I'll tell you a story. You know, when I first, I was, I am bilingual. To be honest, my dad only speaks Spanish. He's a little ashamed of his English, so he doesn't speak English too often. So I can speak Spanish pretty fluently. I do struggle. I can write in Spanish too, but I do struggle. I'm a lot slower at the writing. I'm a little faster at the reading. But with that said, um, when I had an interview and I was 17, I marked down that I was bilingual, and I was gonna work. I was being a telemarketer for Sitel, right? And I marked down that I was bilingual. And as I walk in to get for my interview, he says, "Hola, Hector, ¿cómo estás?" And I looked at him and said, "Oh, he wants to do this whole thing in Spanish." I'm like, all right, fair game, and did the whole interview in Spanish, right? So you want to make sure that if you're saying that you are bilingual, that you can actually speak the language and hold a full conversation, right? Now, here's the other thing, though. I'll tell you another story. When I was in graduate school, I was presenting, and I was presenting my research, and there was a scientist, a Latino scientist, that came. He by, and I knew he was gonna go in a certain direction because he said, Hector Aguilar. That's how he said my name. And most people will call me Hector Aguilar. But he said Hector Aguilar. And I said, "How are you, sir? Do you have any questions about my presentation?" He said, "Yeah, can you give the whole presentation to me in Spanish?" And I was just like, no. And the reason why I was like, I felt bad. It's like, honestly, no, I can't. And not because I can't speak Spanish, but there were all these science words that I didn't know. How do you say in Spanish? Like, how do you say nucleophile in Spanish? How do you say electrocyclization in Spanish? How do you say sigmatropic rearrangement in Spanish? Right? So no, he was being a jerk, but but with that said, um, you realize that this extends so far, right? I mean, I now know that you can a stem cell in Spanish is called a célula madre, right? The mother cell. I learned this after the fact. Um, but um, but keep in mind, in general, what they're talking about is, can you hold a common, normal conversation, not necessarily a scientific conversation in that language. Okay. Laboratory skills. So remember, we mentioned these the skills that you took in the labs. You guys spent a lot of time doing. If you take a biochemistry lab, you learned a lot of different skills there. Even your biology labs, you learned skills. Include them, right? The point is, include them that if you went back to refresh, that you can go in the lab and do them again, right? And I hope that if I give you the procedure again, that you guys are like, oh yeah, I can do that distillation. I remember how to do it. Then list it as a skill. And don't forget um, any equipment, right, that you may have learned to use that's unique that people don't use. You can include that also. All right. Make sure. Okay. Now, other useful content. I don't suspect that any of you have patents right now, but you might. You might have a patent in the future, and you'd want to list that to show that you have some proprietary ownership of something. Certification or licensure. Um, if you have a license or certification, you should include that in a different category. For example, some of you might be CPR certified. Um, some of you might be for equipment. Sorry, Mary, I missed it. What was your question, Mary?
So for equipment, so like for instrumental analysis, we kind of run the NMR. How would you list that on your resume?
Yeah, I would put that under skills, and that's a very good question. Thank you. Familiar with NMR operation, right? How to use an NMR. For those of you that were lab technicians, in the chemistry teaching labs, y'all gained a lot of experience. You can run GCs, you can run IRs, right? You actually have hands-on experience with those instruments. And if you can actually run the instruments, yes, absolutely put that in there. And that is golden experience, because a lot of times people know how to interpret it, but can they actually run it? That's golden experience that makes you very marketable. Did I answer your question, Mary?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So certification and leisure here. So again, my health professions, you might be first aid certified, you might be CPR certified. Maybe you're a phlebotomist and you have certifications, or a CNA, or an RN, these type of things. Include those. For my graduate students, well, maybe not as impressive as an RN or a phlebotomist, But you definitely have your safety certifications, right? And I talked about these before. You got those certificates and you thought, oh, it's just something I had to do to go to the lab, but it's a certificate, right? And you had to take a course over the lab safety. Put them in there to show that you've been experienced. Now, here's the other thing though, go back and refresh, because the last thing you want to do is say you have the certificate for lab safety and then they put you in the lab and you make all these lab mistakes, right? So make sure that you understand the differences there. And if you say, well, I don't have that many, they're all free on Blackboard. Go do the blood pathogen one. Go do the radioactive agent one, right? And go get those certificates. All right. Department involvement or conferences, we talked about that. But here's another one, professional organizational memberships, right? Some of you might be members of the American Chemical Society. Remember, I'm the faculty advisor, and that's a national membership, right? So you can include that you are a member of a national organization or professional organization. All right. So what not to include? So we talked a lot about what to include. Let's talk about what not to include, which is just as important. And these are some very common mistakes. Do not provide a picture, right? Do not include a picture on your resume or a CV unless you are told to do so, right? Now, I will tell you this, it's usually very odd if they ask you to do so, although it's starting to see that the pre-health professions are moving in that direction. They ask you to provide a professional picture with your application. But in the past, the reason why this was never asked for is because it opens the reviewer up to bias, right? Maybe they don't like people with a certain eye color or a certain skin color or a certain background, right? So this is why they wouldn't usually ask for a picture because it would open them up to bias. So you definitely don't want to attach one unless you are asked. And even if you're asked, it's never part of the resume and it's never part of the CV. It's usually asked as a separate part of an application, okay? The other thing that you never want to do is include personal information, right? This is not a personals ad. You would never say, oh, well, I'm 6 feet tall, 170 pounds, and, 26 years old, single, and healthy. You would never put this, right? This is not a personal ad. And again, if you include this information, and I have seen people include this, that would often open up the person who's reviewing you for some liability that they may not want to be part of. Don't include this, references upon request, okay? Because if they want references, they're going to ask you for references. So don't put references available upon request. If they're asking you for references, then include them. But here's the thing. If you are going to list somebody as a reference, make sure you tell them and make sure you ask them if you can list them as a reference. I don't know how many times I've gotten phone calls to my office. They're saying, hi, I'd like to speak with Dr. Aguilar. I said, this is he. Hi, Dr. Aguilar, we're calling you off so-and-so. They listed you as a reference for this job, and we just wanted to get some feedback about this person. And I'm all like, who is this person? Like, I teach 600 plus students. It's like, nobody? I'm like, oh, that. I'm not trying to cover up. I'm all searching through my email. Oh, that person. How are they? I'm all searching through my emails. Like, did this person send me something? Who is this? Eventually, when I first started off, I was trying to play it cool, be like, now I'm just like, I don't know who that is, and they didn't ask me to be a reference. That's what happens when you've been in the field for a while, right? So ask to be a reference, right? Ask them to be a reference and make sure they're aware and that they're willing to be. And if they're going to be, that they're going to say good things about you, right? So make sure you do that. Do not include, this used to be in the resume before. This is no longer part of the resume, which are hobbies and unrelated experiences. And it used to be there for like to show a humanistic part. Nobody cares anymore, right? They want to know what you bring to the table, right? So you wouldn't include these hobbies anymore. All right. Visual considerations, things to think about, right? You want to make sure that it is very visually appealing to the reader. So you want to avoid a lot of white space. You don't want too much white space because that suggests that you don't have a lot on your resume. But at the same time, you don't want to overcrowd it where it's just like you're cramming so much stuff into one page. Now, if it's a CV, then you have the flexibility because a CV can be, you know, I've seen some CVs that are 50 plus pages, right? Because it's especially for those that have been in the field for a long time, right? Think about font sizes and margins, how to use those to your advantages, bullet points, how to use those to your advantages to make things look a lot neater and cleaner. Headings are very big, and we talked about the different categories as headings. You also want to make sure that you put everything in reverse chronological order, so everything from the most recent to the latest. Don't use templates. I know that there's a lot of templates in Microsoft Word and stuff like this, and I haven't found a template that is actually very good. So a lot of things is for you just to make it from scratch, and it looks a lot cleaner that way. All right. The other here, some general guidelines. Check your spelling, right? Check your spelling and your grammar and your punctuation, because remember I told you this is your first interview right here. And if they see that you have a whole bunch of spelling errors and grammar errors, what that tells them is that you didn't put enough time into preparing for this, right? And you want to make sure that they don't catch those type of things. Make sure you're honest. Do not put, there's nothing wrong with putting stuff like, remember I told you about the safety certificates, there's nothing, that's completely honest. You did do it, right? And you have stuff to verify. You have the certificate, right? But don't put things on there. Like I said, if you're not bilingual, don't put on there. If you only can speak Spanish a few words, un poquito, you know, you're not bilingual, right? You're not bilingual there. So concise and relevant, right? You don't want the reader to spend too much time reading paragraphs. Bullet points come in really handy here, right? So concise and relevant. Be consistent with punctuation, verb tenses, and abbreviations. So in other words, if you're in past tense, be consistent there. And here's another thing. Get second and third opinions. A lot of people are so embarrassed. They are so embarrassed to show their resume to people that, you know, you want to get critiqued, right? And you want to see all that red ink when it comes back so that your resume can be polished and good to go. If you're going to give your resume to somebody to critique and say, oh, this is awesome, this is perfect, this is good, and they give you nothing, then that was the wrong person to give it to, right? They're not helping you at all. So you want somebody who's going to give you some real honest feedback here. All right. So any questions at this point before I move on to showing you my CV here? Any questions? All right, Mary. So Mary says, my friend shared her resume with me and I saw something I had never seen before. She stated how her education was funded. Is that common? No, that's not very common. Not for a resume. Mm-mm. Anybody else? Would it look fishy if a student does community service during the summers when they are back home, like since it's not super consistent through the whole year? No, that's not fishy at all. The idea here is that you did do service, right? And if the summer is a good time for you to do that service, there's nothing wrong with that. Mm-mm. Anybody else? Would you ever mention exposure to cultures such as living overseas if it's relevant to the job, right? If it's relevant to the job. For example, there was a student who wanted to do some environmental science, right? She wanted to be an environmental scientist, and she was applying for a job that was going to require her to go to the reservations where Native Americans still populate. And she had done like a study, not a study abroad, but like a summer internship working with the culture, getting familiar with the culture. So that made her very appealing, right? So she definitely had that on her resume. Anybody else? Okay, so there's no more questions. I'm going to show you now my CV. So this is an old CV. Now my CV, why is it not sharing? So notice how I have this broken down. Now this is pretty old, and oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Clear that. I'm trying to. Okay. So notice here that I have my name in a different color and it stands out. and I have all my contact information below it, right? That's just so that I can save some space rather than having all this stuff in a kind of a blocked out system. Now, my education, I have my doctoral degree, right? Some coursework at another university, and then my bachelor's degree. At this stage in my career, right? At this stage, I put this here for you guys because I want you to keep in mind you'd have your GPAs listed, right? In this stage of my career, nobody cares about my GPA. So in my real CV, I don't have this, right? But for you guys as a reference, you'd include this, right? Like I mentioned before, if it was pretty competitive. Why does it keep doing that? All right, awards and honors here, right? Amber Award in honor of recognition. Notice a description of what it is, and then when it was received, right? When it was received. And I'm just going to go, we only have a few minutes. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. I'll upload this to Blackboard so you have it as a reference, and I'll upload some other samples for you guys too. Okay, so then notice that my career changed a few years ago where I primarily became an educator, right? So a teacher. So I have a whole category just related to teaching experience that we can see down here, right? A whole category related to teaching experience that focuses on what I taught, right? It continues on to the next page here. And then I also even go all the way back to my graduate training as a teaching assistant. Now I've been in the field as an educator for previous things like a teaching assistant stuff would fall off because I've progressed so much into the field. Course evaluations, which again, if you were a teacher, those would be relevant. But here's the one for the research experience, right? So notice here, have lead scientist as a collaborative research project with Eli Lilly Pharmaceuticals, PI Doug France, University of Texas San Antonio, and then a very short description of what it is that I was working on, right? So postdoctoral research fellow and so forth, okay? If we scroll down a little bit more, you'll see my publications here, right? So publications here, right? We have the authors, we have the journal, and this is all in ACS format, right? This is all in ACS format. Patents, right? If you have patents, you'd have that listed there also. Presentations, right? Any presentations that you would have given at professional conferences, those would be listed, all right? And notice the way you have them listed are the authors here, the title of the presentation, where it was presented. So, so if we look at this, this was presented at the 42nd National Organic Symposium in Princeton, in New Jersey, in June 2011, right? So these type of things, you want to have it in this type of format. Service, any service that you've done, right? You want to give a title, the time frame that you've been doing that service, and a very short description of that service, right? And maybe some of those accomplishments there. All right, and then supporting grants, well, y'all won't have to worry about that. But this is a CV, right? So this here is a CV. It is a record, although only from 2017, I think I got this one in 2017. So this one is about 6 pages. My CV right now is up to 15 pages, right? So a CV will keep track of your history, right? And they'll always go back and take a look at it. A resume would have to try to get this to 1 page, right? So, and that's why, again, for a resume, you try to get this to 1 page and you have to gear it to the job description. So for example, if I was applying for another job, and let's say it was to be an educator, to be a teacher, then I'd probably drop a lot of this other things, right? And focus a lot more on my teaching ability, right? Now, it's okay, you know, resume is typically 1 page. However, it's not uncommon for it to go a little over 1 page for scientists. For scientists, because we end up being very productive, it's not unusual for a resume to be about 2 pages, but definitely I wouldn't go past 3, because at that point we're getting a little closer to a CV. All right, any questions about these things here? All right, so if there's no questions, this is what we're going to do. You guys know that you have a rough draft due, right? So turn in that rough draft on Blackboard, and we're going to set up a meeting to go over your rough draft to try to get this polished. But what I also want you to do is for that resume or CV, whichever that you want to do, you need to mention to me, this is a resume for what? Or this is a CV for what, right? So if this is a resume for a job, I want you to go find that job description that you're applying to and attach it to that rough draft. If this is a CV for graduate school, I want you to tell me what graduate program is that you're applying to so that we can make sure that this is actually useful. I want whatever you're producing for this class is something that you can actually use in the long term. I think I told you that, was it 2 years ago? I've been teaching this class every year for the past 5 years. And 2 years ago, everybody in that class placed and where they wanted to be, whether it was the job that they were interviewing for, the graduate program they were interviewing for, or the medical school they were going for. Every single person in that class placed. And I think it's because we geared exactly what they were preparing for was for that end goal. It wasn't just an assignment to do. It was specific to what it is they were going to apply for. So that's what I encourage you to do with these resumes and CVs. And if you're like, well, I haven't thought about applying for anything, okay, then go find a job and use it as practice. Go find a job description and use it as practice and build your resume for that. And if you're going for graduate school or medical school, then you might be thinking a little bit more about a CV. All right, any other questions? What was the syllabus say? I don't think it's tonight. No, I think I gave you a few days. I think it's due next week, isn't it? I have the syllabus on this thing. April 14th,
The discussion and conclusion is due tonight, and then the abstract. Oh no, you said the abstract was pushed back later.
Right. And
So
since Alejandro says the 14th, is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Anybody else? What if we don't know where we are doing with our lives? Well, think about it this way. You have plenty of time right now because we can't go anywhere, right? So there's plenty of time to think right now about what you want to do with your life. So here's the thing, guys. You may not know exactly what it is that you want to do, but you might have a general idea. You might like, I think right now I'm interested in graduate school. Okay, then go that route, right? And go for it. And let's see if that's something that you want to pursue. Anybody else? All right. Well, then I will see you guys on Thursday. Tuesday. And I wish you all the best. Stay safe and stay home. See you guys. Alejandro, you have a question?
No, it was up from the last time. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No, you're fine.